Right, I did get bored one night, and I did pretty much sort my buttons out into different colourways. Lots of noise, sorry. And so now we need to do, oh, that's a nice one. So now we, shiny things, sorry about that. So now we've got to decide, oh, it's too big. That's a shame, isn't it? Now we're looking at scale of buttons. Oh, let me move my machine right out of the way because we're talking about scale of buttons now and how they look. Let me just move you down slightly more. Hold on 1 second. There we go, that's better, isn't it? Okay, so this one I saw and I thought, well, that's lovely. That's really a little bit iridescent. That would really catch the light nicely. It's probably a little bit grey, but it picks up the top stitching nicely, but it's just that little bit too big. So I was just looking for some other buttons to see what else we've got. That one's quite a nice size. So maybe we're trying to find, I mean, that's probably a good size. Probably needing to find size first. Or what about those? No, that's too big again, I think. Slight purple tinge to it as well. So yeah, now we just need to choose what we're going to have as our buttons and what colour. Oh, that one looks nice. I like that blue one rather than the black one, actually. See if I've got some more of those. So you actually need 8 buttons the same. Now, if you've got a kit, you won't need to do this stage because you've probably got your buttons already. But all I do when I'm trying to work this out is I just get a selection of buttons out. If you've got a tray, sometimes you can put them out onto a tray. Sorry for the noise. And then you can just start to have a look and see what you've got and what might match. Now, these are very mismatched selections, so I might not have enough of any one. Oh, you see, that's a nice one. Any more like that? I'll show you that one. It's kind of two-tone, isn't it? But looks very nice. Right colour as well. So I'll keep my eye out for some more of those, but in the meantime I'm looking for these blue ones, blue round ones. I want iridescent green. See what we can find. So let me go on a button hunt, but see what you've got as well. I mean, it's you know, I mean, these are all the rejects that I've got because I think that they're possibly too big. I think they're probably better size suited for the coat. It's just trying to work out what you're happy with and what you're not. And you know, personal taste is different for everybody. So you know, if you like something, then go with it. You don't have to just go with what somebody else says just because they think they know better. You just go with whatever you like because that's the most important thing. So let me just have a quick look through my button box, see what else I can find. There's another one, I think, of the blue. We're nearly there on the blue ones, and we'll see how we get on. I think I'm going to go with those ones. I think they're the right ones, and I'm fairly certain I'm going to have enough of those. Okay. I don't want to make any more noise while you're watching, so I'm going to put these away and find some more of these. I just need 3 more of this colour here. Hopefully I've got those, and then we'll be able to look at stitching those on. Okay, so we've now got a completed coat with all of the main construction points done, looking very lovely and fabulous. It is going to pick up all the bits of fluff, so I'm going to be forever picking bits off it, but in terms of the construction, it's all beautiful and it's lying flat. The next thing that we're going to do is actually talk about the finishing. Now, I have chosen the buttons, which are these little navy ones here, and I'm sewing them on with the same thread that I've used for the top stitching. So, as I said before, you could have always... No, let me go back. So now we're on to the finishing touches. So now we're on to adding buttons, and we're on to how to sort out this front fastening, because in the book... Sarah's got buttons and buttonholes. That's not the right page. I think there's a close-up of the buttonholes somewhere. Oh, now I've seen it. Here, look. So there's a close-up of the buttonholes just here. But as I said, I have tried, and my machine is not loving trying to do buttonholes so close to this neck edge. So I've come up with an alternative solution. It's not something that I've invented, it's well known, but it's something called covered press snaps. So this is what these are here. So I've covered them in the same fabric as the lining, and these will be used to close the coat, and then there'll be a button on the top just to highlight it. But I thought I'd show you how to do these because they're really quite sweet, and whilst these ones are miniature, and yes, they are extremely fiddly, and you might want to give it a skip and just use snaps, plastic snaps or what have you if you wanted to. If you are able to manage these, I mean, these ones are really tiny because they're the ones that I got. These are size 000. But I thought I'd show you how to do them on a slightly bigger one so that you'd be able to see what I'm doing. So let me just put the coat out the way for a second because I think this is going to be a nice alternative. So I've got a press stud here. Put that on the top here. So these two sides just press on top like that, and then you separate them that way to release them. And what I've done is I've found that I've got a bobbin here because a bobbin is about the right size for the fabric to be cut out. We do trim it down again, but I thought I'd just use that. So let me find so I've got a little scrap of fabric here. And I'm going to find a pen, which is here. So I've got my Frixion pen. So I'm just going to draw around two of these two bobbins, just to give me a shape. Now, when you are when you've done a few, you can freestyle it because you'll know how much space you need. But if you're just starting or you're a beginner, then I would suggest finding something that's just slightly bigger than your. So I've got these, look, and if I put that on the middle, you can see it's slightly bigger than the actual snap. Now you do need slightly bigger for doing the for this side of the snap, so just be aware of that. So I'll leave myself a little bit of extra room on that one, but the other one should be okay. So I'm just going to cut out this fabric now and show you how I do these. So I just thought it'd be easier on a bigger one, just so that you can get the gist of what's happening without having to get your microscope out to try and see what I was doing with the smaller ones. Take a little bit of practice, but they're also really nice on ready-to-wear clothes as well. Well, sorry, they're nice on dressmaking clothes as well, if you ever have the chance to make those. Now, a couple of tips. What we're trying to do now is I'm going to do this one first with the little bobble on it. And what I found is that you want to be able to separate the threads in the middle of your circle. But so if you use your awl or you use a knitting needle or something like that, that's going to make a hole in the centre without breaking your threads, because you're not making a snip to make that hole, you're just putting the awl through just to make a hole like that. And then what I'm doing then is pushing the knobbly bit of the snap, if it'll work, through that hole that I've just made by moving the threads to one side. Just take a little bit of practice and patience, but she says it should work. So I think the hole needs to be bigger, so you can be quite rough with it with this quilting cotton. It's really quite robust. There we go, that's better. I wasn't being rough enough. So I've just got the little pointy bit of the press stud just fastening through, and this is the way I've found it easier to do. Then what we're going to do is we've got a needle threaded with some thread. You only need it single, you don't need it double. And then I always start with my knot on the inside, and we're going to go about halfway along because we're going to gather this up so that it covers around the button. So I'm going to go in about halfway between the edge, because if you go too close to the edge, then it's going to pull apart before you've had a chance to do it. Hold on a second, my thread's double at the moment still, and I want it single. That's it. So I always start with my knot on the inside, and I'm holding it between my finger and thumb just to be able to keep it steady. And then you're doing a little running stitch around the outside of this circle, but you are avoiding the very edge, and I'll show you why you do that at the end. I'm nearly out of press studs. I've got to get some more, so I'm over in the UK in February, so I'm going to pick some more up then. Oh no, not in my thread. Always on camera, isn't it? if ever it's going to do something like that. That's it, got rid of it. Okay, so let me just complete this circle. And then I do a stitch, I make a stitch just past the end of where I start on the knot, because that seems to not put so much pressure on that knot to pull through. And then once you're ready, you then pull on the thread, the gathering thread that you've just made, and pull it tight without snapping your thread, and it covers over your button, your press stud. So that looks really nice and sweet. So now what we've got to do now is we've got to secure this fabric on without having all of this bulk at the back here that you can perhaps see, hopefully. So what I start to do then is I start to go across with stitches, and I go as low as I can do in the fabric. I should put my glasses on really. Let me just get those. Low as I can on the stitch. Oh, they're on my head. I haven't lost them at all. They're just on my head. Okay. And you're just pulling this in, cinching this in. And just by going almost like the numbers on a clock, just going round and round and round. Sorry, I was taking it to me so I could see. And just keep going backwards and forwards. And I'm going quite close to the edge and quite low down, because that does help you be able to snip off more of the bulk at the top. Just keep going around and just keep changing direction. Oops, flying press stud. Pull a little bit too hard there. This was the biggest press stud I got, folks, so I'm sorry if you're not able to see it quite so well. But as you can hopefully see, it just cinches in, those little stitches just start to cinch in all of the fabric around the press stud. So that eventually you've got this piece of fabric quite tightly secured onto the top of your press stud. Okay, once you're happy, I just do a couple, that's on enough, I then just do a couple of stitches just through a couple of threads, just in lieu of a knot, just on the side here, that'll just hold it together. That's 3 stitches, not a couple, but you get the gist. And then you can snip your thread off. Okay, so this is what we've got at the moment. We've got our press stud showing through. And we've got this bulk of fabric at the back. So then what I do then, take my snips and then start just reducing down the bulk by taking off some of those extra bits of thread. Make sure you're working over a table or something. This isn't something to be doing on a patterned carpet in your lounge. Just do a few little snips. You're not trying to go so far that you're going to compromise your gathering stitches. But because you put those other stitches across holding it, you can get further down than you might think. Oops. And then if you flatten it out with your fingers, then the idea is that will go fairly flat. Okay, I can't see what you're looking at. So that's one done. So let me put that to one side. So now on the other one, we're going to do the same sort of thing. We're going to do it slightly differently, in that now this one does have a hole going through the middle. So we're going to put a hole on here still, because we still need that hole for the other one to go through, so you need that to be quite big, and these fibres will go back. And on this one I'm going to put a pin through the fabric and then through the back of the snap, just to hold it together. Oh, I'll go the other way, Claire. Just to hold it together, so whilst we're working with it, it's going to stay pretty much on centre. Then if we take the thread again, single thread, it doesn't need to be double. This one's a long one because I was planning ahead for the other things that I'm going to be doing. And that's going to hold it in place for us, and then again we're going to start with the knot on the inside again, and we're just going to doing it this wrong way round. Stop. See, I'm trying to show you, and if I was concentrating, so I've got to go that way through because we want to go through the back. That's better because the hole's got to be on the other side. Right, sorry, apologies. Right, starting with the knot on the back. And the knot's got to be big enough that when you pull on it, it's not going to come through your fabric. We're just doing that little running stitch again around the edge of the press stud. Got caught on my pin. Oops, stabbing into myself. You just spin it round and just do those stitches all the way round. You've probably seen these types of press studs on ready to wear. They do them on wool coats quite a lot as well in the UK. I've seen them before. It's always nice to know how to do something. So anyway, so now we've got this. We've got the pin holding the press stud in place, so now we can just pull on the threads. Yours might not have a hole. If it doesn't in the middle of the little cup, then just hold it with your finger and thumb. And then you can just cinch that back in again. Take the pin out now because that's done its job. And then we can carry on just cinching that in together. And what we're trying to do is make sure that hole stays kind of in the middle. We can make it slightly bigger if we need to. And then we're going to do the same thing again. So we've got our thread here and we're just going to do those stitches across like across the numbers on a clock. Just try and keep them quite low because then you don't run the risk of snipping them when you snip your fabric off. It just holds the excess fabric off. It just holds the fabric quite nice and tight on them. Oops, keep moving it for me to be able to see, and I need you guys to be able to see. It does keep pinging off every now and again, doesn't it? At least it's attached on, isn't it? But I did lose one the other night when I was trying to do one of the smaller ones, and it did take me 10 minutes to find it. And being as I'm short on press studs then, but I'll be able to pick some up. I did try to go to the haberdashery shop in Spain and they hadn't got any small enough. But I know exactly where to get them in the UK, so I'll be making a trip next time I'm over. Right. More stitches just to secure that thread and then we're done. Right, okay, so we've done that now. Just do a couple of stitches over this side. That should hold that together. They do take a little bit of time, but I'm hoping that when you see them on the coat, you're going to agree that it's a worthwhile substitute for the buttonholes, which, as I say, I think I tried 5 and had to unpick 5 buttonholes, which wasn't easy. So now we've got this, what I'm going to do now, that hole's slightly closed up, so I know what I'm going to do with that now. So is we're just going to ping off the excess fabric. There's not a neat way of doing this, I'm afraid, because it's quite dense in the middle there. And that crisscross of threads that you've done when you secure the fabric on by going, as I say, across the clock face, it does seem to hold it on quite well. And then I do put the blades of the snips in the middle just to try and take off a little bit extra where I can. And that's what I say, if you keep your stitches low, you're not going to run the risk of going through those, hopefully. Okay, that's going to do. So, like on this one, the hole is closed up slightly. So whilst all we want to do is we don't want to go too gung-ho with this, is I'm literally going to do 2 stitches. I'm going to take one thread there and cut through that, and then the corresponding thread that goes across the other way and cut through that. And that should be enough just to reinstate that hold. Because what you want to be able to do is when you click these together, you want the fabric not to be in the way. When these click together, it still is. I might just have to undo just one more thread. Do you need your glasses on for this work? Anybody else holding their breath while I'm trying to do this? One there and one there. So you can then just enlarge that hole. You try not to cut so many fibres that it compromises the fabric, but sometimes on the little ones I didn't have to cut any fibres, I could just move them out the way and it was enough. Let's try this again now. Yes, there we go. So it's clicked in. So we can separate it with our fingernails, and that's clicked in. Okay, so that is the covered buttonhole process that I have used. That's ones that I've done for the big one to show you. Big one, relatively speaking. And these are the size that I sat and did last night, which are fairly tiny. Okay, so that's the difference in the sizes, which is quite significant, isn't it? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to finish off I've got most of mine done, and then we're going to start and sew these on. So let's just get my needle and thread sorted again, because it's not at the moment. I'm going to use a double thread for sewing the button on first, because I've sewn one sleeve button on, but we're going to sew the other one on together. So I'll show you how I do that, just to stabilise it and get it all together. So I've made a knot in the bottom of my thread, and I'm just going to take off the tail. We come over to the coat, and just move those bits out of the way because it's going to get my coat. I'll just put a pin there to hold it at the moment. So I take the pin out, and then what I do is lift the flap up. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the button band first. So go through the back of the button band first, because that's going to hide our knot. Let me take the little tail off the end of my thread. And I just do one stitch in place, just capturing a few of the fibres of the felt, just to anchor that knot in place. That's what we've got at the moment. I then take a button, and I'm going to go up from the back of the button and down through the top again, and that just means that then that button can't ping off anywhere and get lost while we're trying to hold it. Because the next thing that I'm going to do is now position this button on this armband bit. Now on the other one, oh look at all the fluff. I have done it so that the holes are straight across following the length of the button band. So I'm going to do the same with this one. And at the same time, I'm also going to make sure that the button is equidistant from each of the 3 sides of my stitching. So once I've got my button in place, I'm going to just put one stitch through to the back to kind of hold it on. And now we can make sure that the finer tuning of that button is in place with another little stitch. One I can go through. That is quite tight and is going to hold it in place. So once I've got my button in place, now we can look at attaching it onto the sleeve, because at the moment we've only just been going through the little sleeve tab, and now we need to attach it onto the actual sleeve itself. So all I do is lay that across. We're matching the stitching on the sleeve tab to the stitching on the hem, and then once I'm through, underneath I'm going to push my needle through into the sleeve, and by pulling the cuff open a little bit, you can just get in just to secure that down. Make sure it's nice and flat, you don't want it bunching up, And then this is the little tricky bit, because you're trying to go in through the sleeve and come through the hole without catching anything that you shouldn't do, to make it difficult for Luna to get her arm in her coat. But I think there's enough room, depending on how your fingers are. And as I say, if you struggle with this, then on future ones you can always make sure that you sew the button band on before you sew the sleeves up. And then I'm going to do 5 or 6 stitches just to hold that in place. You can see how your needle gets caught on bits and bobs, but just take your time. You should be able to get it sorted. I think this is why I did the finishing on a separate video, because the other one, the part 1 and 2 video, when I edited it, I mean this is the day after, edited it last night, they were coming out about an hour and a half each, which is long enough for anybody, I think. But you can start and stop and go back to the videos, so it's not too horrendous, is it? So I'm making these nice and secure, and then when I'm ready, I then just peel the sleeve of the cuff back to expose the underneath of where the button's been sewn, and then I go through a little bit of the felt on the back of the button and the stitches that I've just done. That keeps me all in line. I do a few stitches in place, and then when I've got a little loop like that, I then go through the loop with my needle once, pull it tighter down, and then I go through the loop with my needle again and pull that nice and tight, and that usually does the trick. Snip your threads, and there we've got a lovely nice button sewn on that's been sewn in place and isn't too fiddly for us to be able to try and manage that as well. So the next thing then we've got to do now is sort out the buttons on the front of the coat. Now I'm going to do right over left as the coat is worn, so I hold it against myself, and then that will help me identify. Oh, hold on a second, loads of fluff. Right, that helps me identify right over left. Because the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to place my buttons on the front of the coat. So we've got our tailor's tacks, one's just come out, but we can pretty much see where it is. So we're going to start and place these one at a time. So I'm going to start at the top here and do the same thing with the thread. So let's do a knot. And what we can do on here is we can actually fold the facing back so we can get to the inside of the coat. And that actually means then that we don't have to have any button stitching on this part of the thing, because the other side, the press studs are going to go on the inside to do the actual fastening itself. The buttons are just for decoration. So I'm going to take a little nick of felt there. I'm going to cut off the tail of my thread, and then I'm going to go through the button again whilst it's in my hand, and down again. And I'm on the line of the felt, and so I can take a little bite. In actual fact, you don't have to go through from the inside. You can do a little bite across. So it might be a different way to the way that you would normally sew on buttons, but it's just meaning that I'm not going all the way through the felt. So I'm going through the hole there, not going through any fabric at that time, just through the holes on the button. Just pull that nice and tight so it's nice, going to sit nice and flat. And then I'm just going to go through some of the felt on the underneath. Not all the way through, I've got my fingers underneath so I can tell I'm not going all the way through. And then just making sure that your button is lying straight. Don't want to get that caught in there. And I'm working on the middle ones first, because then I can make sure we can follow the lines of the tailor's tacks that we did. But this should then hopefully give us a nicely sewn on button. So once I've done that, I'm going to go on and sew. Oh, let me just show you how I finished off there. So I've done quite a few stitches there, and then what I do is I just go through some stitches through almost like the shank of the stitches that I've done underneath the button only. So through a little bit of the felt and through my stitches. There's no need to wrap the needle around the button because they're not going to be used for actual. Take those bits out now, we've got their placement, haven't we? If it won't come off, just cut it really close down to where it was, and we'll sort that out a little bit later. And just do several stitches through the back of the button. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to lift the facing up and take my needle through to the back of the work here. And then I can just secure that thread through some of the fibres, just to give me a bit of a tail. So that's our button nice and neatly sewn on. There's our tailor's tack on the side there that was telling us that was the placement or the level of that one. Snip those off really close. Okay, so I'm going to do that now for the rest of the 6 of the buttons that they're on the front. And then we've got those done, and then I'll come back and show you how we then sew the press studs on underneath so that we can actually use those for the closing. But I've put the buttons on the right hand side of the coat as it's worn, just so that that's when it's done up, it looks as if the buttons are through the buttonholes. So that's the reason why I've chosen it to do it that way. Okay, I'll be back to you in a short while. Okay, so it is a few more minutes than I originally intended to come back to you with regard to the coat, but hopefully you can see that I have made some progress. So we've now got all 6 buttons on. I've made sure that all of the holes are going in the same direction pretty much, and that they're equally spaced as well. Now, these do finish differently, slightly lower on this pattern than shown on the book. If you look at the placement of the buttons against the welt pockets, I think the others are more up in this area here as 6. So check your space and see what you like. I just followed the tailor's tacks because I hadn't said to you to change it, and I thought it was unfair to change it at the last minute, but it still looks lovely, so that's fine. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to now sew on the covered press studs that we've made. So if I just open this up, you can see I've jumped ahead a little bit, and I've already sewn these on so you can see how these look. And I think they look absolutely darling, I must admit. Yes, they're fiddly, they're a little bit small, but I think that the overall effect as an alternative to the buttonholes, if that's not working for you, is really quite a good idea. Hopefully you agree. So we've gone through already earlier in the video on how to actually make the covered buttons. And I've got them here in this little pot, so I didn't lose them, because I did lose one part way through. So I had to redo it. And well, I'm just going to sew these on now because I thought that might be useful for you to see how to do that. So apologies if you think, oh yes, I know how to do this already. Just skip ahead and get on with making your coat. But for those who want to see it actually done, then I thought I'd save those ones to do. So I've got my needle and thread together, and I've actually matched the thread to the fabric on the press studs, not on the coat itself, because I think that we can hide those little stitches. I don't know if you can see under here that they look really quite neatly on and you can't see the stitches. And although there's some bulk underneath the little press studs, especially the smaller ones, I think on the bigger ones you can hide it better, but there's plenty of loft in the coat to hide that, so they don't look bulky as you might have thought that they did. So let's get on with sewing this last one. Let's sew the bottom one first, and we'll do that one. So if we find the one with the little knobble on it, and what we do is I feel with my finger for where my buttons are. This is why I've sewed the buttons on first. So I feel with my finger for the button, and I've got that underneath with my finger underneath, and then you can then position the press stud so that you can kind of tell that it's kind of in the middle. And that's what you really want, because we want this to look neat from the inside as well as we're sewing these on, and to make sure that they look right. The other thing that you can do as well is you can do up the ones that you've already done. Obviously the first one you're going to have to kind of have a go at, but once you've actually got these done up, the placement is actually dictated for you. Get that one in. Oh, That's it. So the position is kind of dictated for you because you can see that there's only one real place where that button can go, and luckily it is on top of the tailor's tack that we've already done. So with that one in place, not that side, Claire, this side, under the button. I mean, the best way I do it is just by feeling the buttons, because the buttons have dictated really where it goes. So then it's a matter of holding on to the little press stud. I don't worry about the little threads at the moment. First of all, we've just got to get it anchored on. So I've got a knot at the end of my threads, and I'm just going to take a little stitch from underneath the button out toward, not towards the button, but from underneath the press stud out towards the edge of it. And then that just holds on to there. And then now I'm going to take a stitch almost sideways through the threads on the fabric. So I'm not going through the holes of the buttonhole. You can do if you want, not holes of the buttonhole, Claire, get your words right. The holes on the press stud, because if you've seen a press stud, where have I put some? They've got little holes on them that you can, I can't see one now. Oh, I don't know how to put them. They've got little holes in the metal that you can actually thread through, and you might be used to sewing them on that way. But for this way, we're going to just go through a few fibres on the edge of the press stud itself. It will try and move, so just be aware, and that's why it's quite a good idea to be working over the top of a work surface whilst you're doing this, so hopefully if it pings off, it's not going to go too far. I have been scurrying around on the floor for some of them, I must admit, because they did. Even with me being careful, they still do tend to ping off. And then I'm rotating the coat, if you see, and taking a little stitch out of the felt, and then coming up sort of sideways and through a few stitches, through a few threads on the actual underneath of the buttonhole. So I'm not coming through just one stitch on the underneath, on the top. Oh gosh. Take a breath, right. I'm not coming through on the very edge of the press stud like this. I'm actually scooting my needle through the felt and then sideways through a few of the threads on the underneath of the spare fabric on the underneath of the press stud. And that way it does just, I'm going to unthread my needle, it does just give you a little bit more anchorage, because if you just pick in one thread, because they're so short, because they've been snipped off, then it can come undone. So now, as we're getting round to the front, any loose threads you can get rid of, but now I'm going to use the point of my needle to tuck the threads underneath. I'm still feeling my button underneath from the underside. And now I'll take a little snip of the little pitch of the felt, and then separately a few threads from under the press stud, and it starts to just pull it in and pull it down. So a few threads of the felt, making sure not to go through to the other side, and then a few on the underneath of the press stud. And I'd go round these twice. So the first time is really to attach it and to hold it in position, and once we've got it in position you can let go of the underneath. The second time is to start and neaten it up, and I just push any threads that are loose underneath with my needle, and then try not to go in the same place as you've already stitched. But I am cinching it in quite tightly, so that's what helps it disappear down into the fibres of the felt. And then I'm just twisting and twisting the coat as I go, so working our way around it. So here we've got a little bit that's showing, so let's just show you what I do with that. So keep sewing. So when you get to a bit here where we've got some threads showing underneath, just use your needle and just push those underneath, and then you can take another stitch from round the outside and through. And if you do a couple of stitches together, it should just hide those hide that, look, it's just cinched it back in again. So we'll carry on round. As I say, I go around twice on these. If they were bigger, I might go around 3 times, but these are so tiny, can't fit too many stitches in otherwise. And there we go. So I'm back to the beginning now. Now to cast off, so if you have a look on the front here, you can't see any stitches coming round to the side other than what's holding the button on. If the stitches are underneath the button, you might think that's fine as well, so don't worry about that. So then what I do now is I just start to take a few little stitches, so I just go straight through, and I'm trying to kind of catch a little bit of the back of the fabric, but sometimes it's a bit dense and you can't always go through. So I'm going through the back and just going straight across like this. But keep coming out underneath the press stud still. And another one. So you're just doing some little stitches really, just to give you a nice long tail, so that it's not going to come undone very easily. And this is exactly the same process I would use if I was sewing this onto a garment, you know, like a coat or something like that, to use it for that purpose too. Okay, so that'll be enough now, I think. So now just snip the thread really close to my stitches, and we've got another one sewn on there. So that's all 6 on that one. Now with the other one, I follow the same process for sewing it on, and you know we spoke about how we need room for the little knobble on here to fit in, because it's still got to click in and you've got the fabric in between it, so it starts to impair that if you're not careful. So don't use any fabric that's too stiff. So if we go back to doing this coat up on the work surface, that's it, then we can see roughly and feel roughly where the other one needs to go. Just peel it back. We've got our marker anyway for the tailor's tack. And then I also just keep an eye on the spacing down the front here, just to make sure that's okay. And maybe it needs to come a little bit further down, just to make it right. Okay, so let's go again. So first one is a stitch underneath to anchor our thread. Just take the tail off that knot, so it hides, and then holding it with your fingernail down and one finger underneath, and then start to make sure I've not moved that. Oops, I have now. As I say, these ones are really fiddly because they're just so tiny. I probably would if I'd got one size bigger, I probably would have used one size bigger. So there you can see I take a smidge through the fabric, a little stitch, and then I'm starting to, oh, it's a little bit high. Hold on a second, that one's gone a little bit high. Let me just undo that stitch. A little bit trial and error, because as I say, they do shift around on you, so we don't want them to do that. If I just said to you, oh yeah, just stitch them on, they're really easy, then I'd have been fibbing, wouldn't I? Because they are fiddly, but once they're on, and you get plenty of practice because there's 12 of them, so that's always good too. Right, let's try again. I'm going to take those little threads out because I think they're bothering me. Right, okay, so let's pop this back down again in the right place, a little bit further over. That's about right. Okay, so take a few stitches from around and underneath the side, and then back through the felt again, just a little bit, and then up through the side again. And all the time you're just twisting the fabric of the coat round so that you can access it and see what you're doing. And you can take as many stitches as you like around the edges, just whatever you're comfortable with and whatever you can manage. More is better than less, I suppose, really, up to a point. But then once you feel like it's on, then you can cast off your threads and cast off your stitches. but I think it gives a really nice alternative finish to the buttonholes. It's not any quicker, so don't be thinking that, but very rewarding. Okay, so we're about to go around our second time now as well. Hopefully you can see all of this. Through a few threads from the felt. And then what I have found is that we do need to just snip a couple of threads in the middle of the actual hole itself, just to make the hole a little more permanent. But you can't do that until you've actually stitched it on, because if you do, when you're catching a few threads like this, you can actually pull the threads out. So you need that fabric across the top here to be intact whilst you're sewing it on, because if you did by some reason pick up the threads with your needle that you'd actually snipped, you'd then pull them out, and that'd give you a hole across the whole of your top of your button press stud then. Right, so we've gone round twice there, just a little cinch in, and then I'm going to do those stitches just around the edge, just to hold my thread, make it a nice long tail that's unlikely to unravel. It gets caught sometimes on the density of the fabric or on the metal rim as well of the press stud sometimes. So just wiggle around with your needle until you find your way through. If you need to, you might want to use a thimble as well for this. There we go. Use the work surface to press down on. As I say, they're nice and tightly fitted, so I don't think they're going anywhere. Okay, that's the last one. Okay, so then with that on, what I'm doing now is just grab my spectacles, glasses, because then what we're going to do now is use the quick unpick. So like on this one, is we're just going to identify a couple of threads that are in the very centre of the hole that the knobble bit needs to go into. So literally put the quick unpick in, and you're just looking to pick out one thread over the top of your quick unpick, and then take it to the blade and just cut it. And then what I find then is if you take another one on the other direction, there, that starts to give you the start of the hole that you need to fit it through. Now, I think I need another one as well. So it is delicate work to do. And we don't want to go to, we can't just go in straight in with the edge of the snips, because the snips would take out too much threads, and that would make it just a bit too loose and a bit too much. So I think that's about right. If you've got any loose threads, any loose fibres or any fuzziness, you can just snip that off with the threads, with the snips, once you've actually got your hole going. And then it's a matter of just checking it with your other side of your press stud to make sure that you've got some hold on there. I mean, they're not going to work quite as tightly as they do if the fabric's not there, especially on this small scale. You can try covering them with lining fabric, and sometimes that'll work too, but there's enough of a purchase to keep the coat held to whilst your Luna is wearing her coat, or whichever character. The only other thing that I wanted to say to you as well is that, you know, I'm not a fan of the seam edges here, but because this is felt, what we can also do is we can, you know, I just find it's a bit bulky and a bit rough looking. So what I did on the yellow one is I just snipped it. So I'm just going to snip it, and I snip it from this top bit here, just at an angle, just to take that bulk out when you first look at the edge of the sleeve. So that's one I've done, and that's one I've not done. So I think there's just a slight difference there. And as I say, it depends on your seam allowance, but I would just snip that little bit off. And it just tidies that up as well. So other than that, you just need then to give your coat a press with your press cloth, just so that you don't spoil any of your lovely work. And then when we open up the press studs, oh, it has caught on quite nicely, that one has, then you can see inside, and we've got all the lovely details of those press studs on the front of that coat. So hopefully you'll agree that that's a nice alternative finish. As I say, if you can do buttonholes, then great. My machine just didn't like them at all. But at the end of it, I think you've got a really lovely, lovely little coat there with your pleat all nice and neat. The actual top stitching is met underneath the arms as well for me, which I was really quite pleased about, so that's good. And it just looks delightful, doesn't it? I'll just get Luna, she's in her dress, and let's just pop her in the coat and see how it looks against her dress. Come on, Luna, get your arms in. As I say, it is snug, but her arms will get, well, the arms of my Luna will go through. Let me just change the camera angle and you'll be able to see a little bit better. Hold on once. Oh, can I get your thumb through, Luna, first? Yeah, let me just change the angle of the camera and you'll be able to see better. Hold on 1 second. So here's Luna in all of her coated glory. Put your collar down, Luna. You don't need your collar out of your dress. That's it. And as I say, the buttons will do up, not the buttons, the press studs will do up, but even if they're just left open, they still look a really lovely finish and then give that a really nice look on the coat. So I hope you've enjoyed watching me stitch today. So this part 3 has taken a little while to do. I kind of stopped and started a little bit and it threw me out off my stride, but hopefully you've enjoyed that. You like this little touch as well, and you think that that's something you might like to do for your Luna. I'll look forward to seeing all of your makes. If you've enjoyed today's video, then please do consider subscribing to my channel. There will be lots more videos coming as well. I plan on working my way through the books. I'm still on book 1 at the moment, and I know other people have raced ahead and they've got a lot more videos than me, but you know, I'm working at my own pace and enjoying the process, which is what I hope for all of you as well. So from Luna and I just want to say thank you for watching, and we'll speak to you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye.